New technology and battle strategies. Much of the new technology and/or battle strategies introduced during World War I changed the way humans fought war forever. This is really the first time that governments from all over the world were trying to innovate and perfect ways of killing people. Many of the technological advancements that we look at here also had uses at home after the war during peacetime. Let's take a look at some of the tech advancements together. Artillery. The use of artillery was one of the most common strategies used during trench warfare. Although the trenches protected soldiers from the hail of bullets, mortars and similar artillery bombs could be lobbed into the trench. Artillery such as this howitzer fired hundreds of thousands of shells before and during large battles. Artillery fire inflicted approximately 60% of all wounds during the First World War. Library and Archives of Canada. Strategy. The creeping barrage. The creeping barrage was a key to victory on the Western Front. This moving wall of artillery fire forced the enemy to remain under cover, where he could not fire on the attacking infantry as they moved across no man's land. That's the space in between two trenches. It was an idea mastered by Canadian Arthur Currie at Vimy Ridge. The airplane. At the beginning of the war, the airplane was used primarily to spy on the opposite troops and to determine where soldiers were located and how many. This was called reconnaissance. As the war progressed, both sides realized the airplane had a more strategic use and began to arm them with machine guns. Pilots became good at attacking other aircraft. These aerial confrontations in the sky were known as dogfights. Over 22,000 Canadian pilots were trained during the war and served in the British flying services. 3 notable Canadians became the flying aces during the war. Billy Bishop, Raymond Collishaw, and William G. Barker received many military awards for their service. Flying as a pilot during the war was tense, nerve-wracking work. Constant alertness meant the difference between life and death. With fragile aircraft, extreme weather conditions, and enemy fighters, a new flyer's life expectancy could be only months or even days. Take a closer look at the war in the air by watching this video. Submarines. Submarine U-boats, what the Germans called Unterseeboot, almost helped Germany win the war. The Germans were the only country to use submarines. Although the fleet was small, U-boats were difficult to locate in the vast Atlantic Ocean, and they sank hundreds of Allied ships carrying soldiers and supplies to Britain and the front lines. However, the effectiveness of U-boat attacks was reduced when the Allies began to travel across the ocean in convoys, which were groups of civilian and supply ships escorted by naval warships across the Atlantic from North America. The threat of U-boats was very real for Canadians on the East Coast. German U-boats sank 26 ships off Nova Scotia and south of Newfoundland in 1918. The Royal Canadian Navy deployed almost 100 small warships to counter the U-boat threat. Let's learn more about the development of the submarine by watching this video. Machine guns. At the beginning of the war, the Germans used machine gun technology efficiently and to their advantage. As German troops dominated the high ground on the battlefield, it was virtually impossible for Allied troops to cross fields during battle when they ventured into a wall of bullets in no man's land. The Battle of the Somme in 1915 resulted in 60,000 casualties as Allied troops flooded into no man's land only to be crushed by a wall of bullets. Over 24,000 Canadian soldiers died that day. Tanks. Although the idea of the tank had been around since the 1800s, it was not used strategically in battle until 1916 at the Battle of the Somme. The idea was that the Caterpillar tracks and armored vehicle would allow the Allies to cross no man's land. Unfortunately, the heavy tanks tended to sink into the marshy surface and battleground mud. As well, the inside of the tank would overheat and metal chips would fly off the inside and injure the drivers. When it first appeared in battle, the tank was effective in terrifying the German troops. However, in subsequent battles, the Allies lost the element of surprise. The tank was not really used offensively until the end of the war. It would, however, play a very important role in World War II. Chlorine and mustard gas were the 2 lethal types of chemical weapons used during battles. The Germans released chlorine gas onto the battlefield of Ypres in 1915. It was the first time Canadian troops were in battle. The poison gas attack almost allowed the Germans to break through the Allied lines. The Canadian troops held the ground and prevented this from happening, but over 6,000 Canadian soldiers were injured and 2,000 died that day.